Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mystic Mavens. I am Joanna White. I'm a spiritual holistic teacher. And tonight, I am excited that our friend Kathy Basil will be talking about claiming your feminine power. Ha. So I'm just excited to be here tonight just to learn more about my feminine power. And I just would like to pass it on to Claudia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Rocafort. It is a pleasure to be here with you. And just to give you a little background, I am a spiritual facilitator and I use all kinds of different tools and forms to support clients to clear any limiting beliefs so that they can achieve what they want in their lives. And I am waiting so excitedly to rock this conversation with my sisters and really enjoy what is that feminine power that we all possess. So Carol, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Carol Pilkington, and I'm a spiritual teacher and counselor, and I specialize in emotional intelligence, working with high achievers that are going through anxiety, depression, stress, and loss and grief. So tonight's conversation is really going to be powerful. It is about claiming the divine feminine within, and I'm going to pass it off to Kathy to get us started.
Awesome. So I'm Kathy Basil here in Denver, Colorado. I am a transformational life coach and I use energy healing and other techniques. I call my company the Vitality Code. And I truly believe that us coming into alignment with who we truly came to be is the initial spark to everything. You can have the diet and the exercise and all those other pieces, but when you come into alignment with who you are, and everything else, all the other choices become easy. So tonight we're talking about the divine feminine, and this is core to a lot of the ways that I work primarily with women. And I wish the terminology were different, because to me, each one of us, whether you're male, female, whatever you identify as or was, or we all have within us the energy of both of these. And the divine feminine is something that is on the upswing. So as consciousness rises, it's time for us to find harmony again between that balance between the masculine and the feminine. It's kind of like that internal balance of yin and yang. It's two different energies and we need both of them. We don't want to lean too far into one and not the other, but that essentially is what's been happening in more of a patriarchal society. We've been overly dominant with the masculine tendencies as just a way of being. And I think tonight's conversation is going to be really juicy. This is super core to the kind of work that I do. And I love our conversations because each one of us Mystic Mavens comes from a different perspective. And it's going to be just as thrilling for me as it is for you. So I wanted to tee up initially with a couple different things that I see of the masculine way that we've been doing things, and this becomes a pattern, it becomes a routine. It's been part of our society and passed down. And literally those beliefs get passed down in our DNA. So we get to doing, it's almost like being in a repeating cycle. So my desire is that after tonight, you get some ahas of ways. It's like, oh, wait, I see how I've been doing certain things. So let me just tee up a couple different contrasts, if you will, of the masculine way of doing things or approaching things or perceiving things versus the way that hopefully our world is shifting, because definitely our world is suffering because of an overdominance of some of the masculine tendencies towards, and I'll tee up the first one as being competition. So in a masculine world, it's oftentimes competition is kind of like trying to take dominance over, looking to win the game, to be number one. So it's a very masculine mentality, if you will. Women tend to be the nurturers. We tend to be the ones that look after, we have the children, right? And we take care of the family. We also, back in the day, used to come together in circles to take care of the village all at once. So women tend to have more of a collaborative approach towards solving problems. They tend to bring the wisdom of everybody to the circle, if you will, and take bits and pieces of that. So everybody has a contribution, that's a win, but also we get to to benefit from having all these brilliant ideas, cultivating the wisdom that everybody has brought together and create a path forward as we collaborate. It's a win-win, but win. A second thing, actually, I like to talk about control. The need for control is something that oftentimes can be associated with a masculine way of being or mentality. And the COVID situation was really fun to see, because I think that really pushed us to our edges, especially those people. I think certain personality types have a need for control more than others. And it was definitely interesting at the beginning of COVID, when nobody knew how long we were going to be pent up and all this, to see how their edges got ruffled. But the need for control is something where we're holding on to what already exists. We're trying to control and push a certain outcome. A feminine way of being, and something that's going to serve our whole society and our world, is to begin to recognize that we can't control things, and to be able to sit with that uncertainty and the desire to have certain outcomes. You can create those goals and desires and visions for what it is that you would like to come to, but there's a certain special dance with the ability to be okay with the uncertainty. So the masculine way of thinking is very logical. It's very linear. And trust me, I've lived a lot of my life in this. My background, I used to do event marketing, and there's a lot of planning and project management, and those kinds of skills and tools serve us super well. I mean, just look at the technologies that we've got because of the ability to have logical, linear thinking. But right now, as we look to create a different world, a world that works for everyone, a world that has more love and harmony in it, it's not going to come by rational, reasonable steps. Sometimes if you want to make a quantum leap, that actually comes about when you have more of an intuitive inside out. So for us to be able to cultivate that intuitive knowing, I think all of us have probably had an example of when something just felt right. I'm going to use the example of my townhouse here, and by all logical means, all the paperwork, when I first bought this place as an entrepreneur back in the day, when the mortgages were really, there was a lot of foreclosures, and it looked like I wasn't going to qualify for a mortgage because I was self-employed and a single woman. And yeah, it was really challenging to be able to get a mortgage, but there was that inner knowing of like, no, this is my place. And to continue to get resourceful and continue to ask different questions. What else is possible? How else can I work this out? Sometimes things, we can get to a solution that you couldn't have rationally considered. So I think, and our business greats like Steve Jobs would oftentimes talk about the importance of his ability to intuitively know where to guide Apple in those early days, to have a vision beyond what was anything that had existed up until this point in time, so that they were able to take steps that no other company had at that point in time. So that's the second one. We're going to talk about competition, logical, rational, linear thinking versus being able to roll with it. And right now, with all the change and uncertainty that's going on in the world, this third one I think is really important. Again, it's kind of an offshoot of that rational thinking, but certainty in a masculine world would come from having all the guideposts on externally. So in my event marketing, I would have timelines and budgets and service providers, and be able to know all the pieces of the puzzle were right here, and for me to arrange them in a way to make the goal. Right now, though, a lot of the ways in which we've sourced our certainty, those things are going to be falling away. We are in this crazy convergence these times. I was just talking with my friend about Tucker leaving Fox News. So big institutions like media and religion and politics and economics and politics, the war that's going on, a lot of the ways in which we've sourced our certainty up until now are going to be falling away. And so the divine feminine is inviting us to go within and to find a source of certainty of maybe it's faith, maybe it's trust, but one of my favorite affirmations is everything is always working out for me. Oftentimes we can come to a choice point where it looks like things are not going to work out well. And I think that right now in our world, there's so much uncertainty and anxiety and depression that have kicked up because people aren't able to see beyond the current certain circumstances because it looks like everything's kind of collapsing and going away. And it's like, well, maybe that's a good thing. So I'm just going to share a quick proverb. It's an old Chinese thing. I call it maybe yes, maybe no. But the Chinese farmer who had a couple horses, and one of the horses went lame, and the village people were like, "Oh, that's such bad news that your horse has gone lame." But what happened is his son came to help work in the field. So his son came to work there, and the village people were like, "Oh, that's such a great news." And he's like, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. Well, what happened is the horse ran away, and the son was trying to capture the horse and broke his leg. The village people were like, "Oh, such bad news, broken leg." And he's maybe yes, maybe no. Then war broke out, and all the able-bodied kids, the sons, got taken away to go to war, and many of them died. So village people, once again, how lucky that your son wasn't at war. So maybe yes, maybe no. These things that are falling away right now, maybe good yeses in our longer term vision that we just can't possibly see now. So if we can cultivate a vision that even in the face of uncertainty, that things can possibly work out. We can't quite see how or where, when that's going to happen. But, even in the midst of certainty, if we can cultivate an inner knowing that everything is going to work out for our higher good, then, I think that can work well for us. And then the other invitation I would like for us to consider for tonight is just masculine. Again, when we're looking to those external guideposts, it's almost like coming from a limited set of resources. So that can create a space where we're fighting over the limited resources, and it cultivates a mindset of lack or scarcity. From the women's standpoint, we are the creators, we're the nurturers, we're the village gatherers. Can we find the space where we come into a mindset where we're sourcing from a space of abundance and joy and love? To me, that's the world I want to live in. Abundance, joy, and love. That's the ripple of goodness that I would like to send out into the world. And I think all of us leaning a little bit more into this feminine way of being, it's within us to start that ripple. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. They say a butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the world can affect the weather on the other side. And I believe if each one of us can begin to source a little bit internally, leading a little bit more from our intuition, coming from a space of collaboration, coming from that mindset of abundance, joy, and love, then I think it's a beautiful shift towards creating the world we all want to live in. So that's kind of my tee up about the divine feminine. Ladies, please dive in.
Wow, a lot to think about and a lot to process. And I love all the things that you brought up, Kathy. One of the things that really resonated for me at the beginning is that part that the feminine and the masculine reside within us at all times, irrespective of what gender we were born with, right? And I've always found myself, as when I was younger, I felt very much like a tomboy. I wasn't embracing my feminine. I grew up with two brothers. I was thrilled to finally have two brothers and the gang of guys that they were younger, but I had so much more fun talking about, I don't know, airplanes and motorcycles and boats and guns and hunting than I did about how I looked or the things that we felt were stereotypically the girly things. And as I grew, I realized that I felt that there was a lot of masculine energy in me, but I wasn't always honoring the feminine energy in me. And the contrary, because of double standards in typical Latin American societies, I really was not a very happy woman that way, right? And it took a while for me to also look at, okay, I felt as a woman, the issues of being looked at as a sexual object, right? Rather than being seen or being recognized for who I was, for how I thought, for what my beliefs were. And so I had all of these not very positive relationships with that feminine energy. And part of that shift for me became accepting sort of sensuality and embracing sensuality before sexuality. It became embracing knowledge. And so my way of handling the things I didn't feel comfortable with was, let me know it all. Let me study it. Let me see how I can find out more. And the way of sort of embracing that or feeling more comfortable with, okay, I can be one of the boys, and I love that. And I loved feeling like I was accepted as one of the guys. But then the connections that I was able to form with my sisters, with my life sisters, with the women that I chose along the path, and the level of intimacy, commitment, nurturing, connection, understanding, when we're able to develop that feminine bond, that nurturing bond, that was magical. And so it really started to shift as I grew and as I was able to accept a little bit more of those aspects in myself. And I also realized that I was always really attracted to men who were very much men, but who had the sensitivity, and they were aware and in touch with their sensitivity. So they had an awareness of their feminine energy.
Yeah, really good. And, you know, women, we've survived. I mean, we're a new generation, not too long ago, of first generation women going into the workplace. So we remember we had the shoulder pads, and you know, we've lived in a man's world, and we adopted and it adapted into that side. But just like you're saying, I love that invitation that we can be both. Let's bring that feminine sensuality even into the workplace, because there's a sensitivity, there's an intuitive approach towards things that just has been lacking up until now. But we get to encompass and embody both, that whole range, those masculine, logical ways of being, but also that intuitive decision making or guidance that can really steer things.
I grew up in an era where, you know, things were just starting to change with regards to how men and women related to one another, and how women were perceived in the workplace during the sexual revolution of the 60s. And looking back, I recognize that, you know, things became very confused for men. They didn't know their role or their place in the world anymore. And it was very emasculating. And while women were trying to find themselves and their place in the world, and getting out from under the thumbs of men, being held back, held down, it was a very painful period. And I feel that we're in that place again, because of all the things that are happening with regards to things being turned back in time. People are pushing for our way of being and our way of life to go back to those times where men had control over everything, and we're in that revolution again, if you will, of fighting for our existence, if you will, literally fighting for our right to exist. And when I started in the workplace, one of the first jobs that I had was working for a woman, and she was so masculine, and I really could understand her perspective and where she was coming from, because I could see and observe how she had to compete with the men, because the industry that we were in the auto industry. And the auto industry at that time was run by men. There were very, very few women in managerial or executive positions.
Mhm.
And she played the man's role. She became the man, and she really did put other women down. So there wasn't a sisterhood in any way, shape, or form. There wasn't, hey, I'm a woman, you're a woman, let me see if I can lift you up. No,
Yeah.
it wasn't like that in the beginning. When women went into a man's world, they left their femininity behind. And it has slowly changed, but we're a young species. We have to remember we are a young species. And it takes centuries and centuries of time for any kind of recognizable change to occur. We are in our infancy of the human species. And it takes patience and perseverance, and really a determination and commitment to discovering the truth of who we are, that we have both within us, like you were saying, and Carl Jung called the animus and the anima. So there is no male, female gender. It's the anima and the animus. And the animus is the feminine. And if you want to go to the I Ching, there's the creating, there's the creation, and there's the reception. Creation is the male energy, and the receptive is the feminine energy. And yes, all of what you were saying before at the top, the male, the creation, they create things. Well, the women are the ones that receive it and manifest it out into the world. We bring it forth.
And nurture it to grow until
That's
it's ready
right.
to roll.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I feel like everybody touched something for me, because with Carol and the workforce, I was in a very masculine workforce for many years, and you got to prove yourself as a woman working on those trains. And it was a very I guess it wasn't competition. You just had to prove yourself as that you can handle the job. That when you showed up, sometimes men will go, oh God, we got a woman today. Like, you don't want to hear that when you show up. And then you don't want to ask for help, because now you feel like you're less than, and falling into the pits of them. Like, you couldn't be a woman. Like, oh my God, I can't lift this. You don't want to say that, you know? And then like the discovery of who I am, and going through years of therapy and things, realizing that in my marriage, I held the masculine energy, being the one with the breadwinner of the family, and just doing everything. And when I going through therapy, you see, I watched a mother that did that. So you take on the roles and you don't even realize that my mother moved in a masculine energy and my grandmother moved in a masculine energy, but it also came from men not being present in the home.
Mhm.
And that shows us as women in the role of that masculine energy. So I didn't even know I wasn't in tune with my feminine energy until about maybe 6 or 7 years. Like, it was early in my awakening process that I found out that, like, oh, you are really not operating in a feminine energy at all. And I didn't even know how to identify that at that time because the roles that I've seen played out in my life, every woman played a masculine energy from work, from home, from church. Like, you go to church and you see them operate in a masculine energy. And not until I really started massage school, then we started breaking down yin and yang and just the different masculine and feminine in every form of life. And then I realized, oh, how you can't have one without the other. It's just developing it. And now my journey has been developing my feminine energy, being able to move in that energy, being able to understand that I can shift it whenever I want to. That's where the real power came, because I don't have to not be in my masculine because I operate in that very well. Just like Claudia said, I was always the only girl. I hung out with the boys. We drove cars. We walked through the woods. We shot guns. We did all of it. And that's who I am. That's who I do. I have 2 boys, 2 sons. Everything I've done has been in the masculine. My dog was a male.
I love it.
So
We
like I
take
said,
on the roles, we take on the roles that are presented for us to take on at any given moment, right?
and that's it.
And I love that you said that, Carol, because that, as I was listening to Joanna, precisely it dawned on me. My mother was a single woman. What I remember, my infancy, my childhood, my early childhood was my mom in her masculine role, right? Single mom, having to make a living, having to create a store, creating not 1, but 5, becoming successful. So it's really interesting. It didn't dawn on me that in those first 7 or 8 years, which creates the majority of the personality, before my stepfather and my brothers came into my world, that was what I knew. Even though my mother had a partner and he was phenomenal and there was a lot of nurturing from him. But it's interesting, my idea of the feminine role was
A masculine.
happen as an emasculine woman.
Yeah. Especially the patterning up till
Women.
the age of 9 or so, because our brain are in that, theta state. We're absorbing everything that happens as it's almost like we're downloading it as our internal operating system. And like, said, we're not even aware that it's happening. So if anything from this show tonight, like just hit the pause button long enough to question, like, where did all this stuff come from? And there's universal healing. And that's why I love working with women in groups, because a lot of the stuff that we're struggling against is actually a collective beliefs. So we touched on, like, it's not safe to be the female in a male dominated company, or, you're looked down upon, but we felt like we're not enough because we're having to straddle all these roles. It's like, no, you couldn't possibly be enough in all of these ways. You are enough, you are lovable, you are deserving. So to me, that's the core message that I would just wish I could download to every woman on the face of the planet right now, is just recognizing that we get to choose at any given time. And just like you said, Joanna, it's a sliding scale. We don't have to constantly be in our feminine all the time, but we do have an opportunity to open and receive in ways that maybe we've locked in the closet somewhere long ago because it wasn't useful then. But now our world needs our ability to go into that intuitive side and tap into that wisdom that goes beyond this 3D world. Like, I think of it, divine wisdom. We need something that hasn't existed before if we're going to create a sustainable world that's going to be, to the benefit of all.
Absolutely.
And the interesting thing that you just said, it was scary. I mean, being vulnerable, stopping to receive, not being quote unquote in control and making my world happen, but maybe trusting and allowing somebody to support me that way or to receive from a man that way. that took work. That took
That's still taking work.
acknowledgement and effort. Sorry, what did you say, Joanna?
I said, that's still taking work.
It's taking work.
Yeah.
But it helps too to know that, I mean, it's a collective thing. It's not just, us because we're wounded. It's like, well, yeah, we're wounded and we're swimming in the pea soup. Everyone's saying, it's not safe or it's not, the vulnerability is scary. It's like, no, but the man really blossoms when he is able to make his woman happy. Like that's at the core of what brings them fully alive. So allow them to come in and swoop you up. But what I see is so many women like me that, and it sounds like a number of us were raised by single moms that were having to do all that stuff. We become so strong and independent that there is no room for anybody else. So it's like, just bring down the the protection a little bit so that they can maybe get a Lego or somehow.
Allow it in, right? To be able to allow ourselves to receive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It is. And so I just want to give a quick, what is it? Like the other day, I'm helping my cousin move and she didn't call anybody to help her, but me and another girl cousin. So we get this bed moved and she goes, yeah, look at how strong you are. We don't need no man. I said, yes, we do. Don't let me hear you say that. I don't ever want to do this again. So sometimes just paying attention to what we're saying, being independent is one thing, but we don't need no man. Wait a minute. That's not
It's interesting.
So,
we might not want to need them, but we definitely want to share with them.
I needed one that day to help that move.
Yeah, that too.
Well,
They just have a great energy.
I don't think it's there's anything wrong with needing the male existence, because sometimes I really do want a man's perspective on things coming from their viewpoint. It's really powerful when we can allow ourselves to coexist without feeling a threat or threatened. And like you were saying, Joanna, we do have to pay attention to our language and saying that we don't need men in the world. We absolutely need men in the world. Without men, we wouldn't have these creatives, some of the creatives that we've had in the various industries that we've had. And on so many different levels, we need that balance. We need that yin and yang. And I really appreciate the men that I've had in my life to give me guidance on some of my perceptions about what men have been going through. And I really want to balance this conversation out with how women have emasculated men to have them be confused about their own nature and their own existence and their own place in the world. And while in some sense that conflict that has arisen is good because it has made them begin to think and feel like maybe I can show my feelings, maybe I can wear my heart on my sleeve. And we have seen more of that over the years. They have become more open and receptive.
Yeah, I love seeing during the pandemic at the park, the dads with their kids playing out in the park. It's like, gosh, my dad's generation would not have had that ability, that time.
Nice.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but
Well, that's one example of a beautiful thing that came of that, right? To be able to allow the fathers to come and take a more active role, and a more hands-on role, which is definitely part of what's happened. I'm guessing, I would think, Carol, since the 60s, right? The roles have shifted. And yes, there is a lot of, I think, I mean, I remember a boyfriend of mine once telling me, honey, let me take the suitcases and put them in the car. But by the time I've come to do it, you've done it already. And I was just like, okay, thank you. Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
They have the strength. I mean, from a physical perspective, they have the strength. So why not allow them to be there for us when we need them without being coy about it, right? Sometimes we're very coy in our nature as women, and we manipulate them into doing things. And that's not, we do. I mean, there have been times for myself when I know that I have been manipulative in having a man do something for me or say something or behave a particular way. Instead of just saying, this is what I would like, this is what I need. Can you do this? Are you open to doing it? Just be open and honest with one another, right? But we had been trained that we needed to use our feminine wiles to get what we want, versus just being flat out honest and say, hey, you know what? I can't do this. You're stronger than me. You're this, you're that. You have certain abilities that I don't have. I'd like to rely on you for that, and give that to them, because that's really what they're wanting. They are the gatherers. They are the protectors, and they want to have that role. They want to be in that role. And we have kind of absconded with that over the years sometimes. I'm not saying all the time. I'm saying some of the time we have, there's always the push from one side to the next, right? Before you meet in the middle, there's always, when you're discovering something about yourself or about life, you go from one extreme to the other. And then as you become more aware and more comfortable within that setting, we kind of move to an equilibrium, if you will, and we don't have to have that push-pull.
It's like that pendulum.
Yeah.
It has to
Right.
happen. It's part of those spiritual laws that govern the universe. And it's interesting, one thing that from listening to all of you that I'd love to bring up and have you share about is that both men and women, that masculine and feminine coexists inside each one of us. And as Joanna was saying before, we get to just sort of stop and look at which one am I operating in at the moment, and which one would best serve me right now too. Because sometimes we're just oppressing and hiding a part of us rather than embracing it. And the same, I think, goes for men. I mean, it goes for all human beings, right? Whenever we're afraid or whenever we're insecure, we try to put on, the strong suit versus the vulnerable aspects of our femininity. And these two sides are constantly coexisting. So can we start now looking at that and say, let me be empowered by both. Let me be empowered by my feminine and my masculine. Yeah. And for a man to say, can I be empowered by my masculine and my feminine? And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to let a woman hug me and hold me and comfort me as I release and cry and talk about how I feel or frustration I've had, right? Just the same way that we could say, hold me, comfort me, support me. Right now, I need that. To me, that's a very beautiful thing. And when it works, I mean, I was a big freedom fighter for women and being on let's empower women, let's support, and to this day, and will always. But I also see, I really love feeling feminine with a man. I love a man opening a door, opening a car door, inviting me out, picking me up. I could very well be the independent woman and meet you there. But how nice was it when a man would actually come and pick you up at home for a date? Like, I miss that.
Yeah, for
Those
sure.
things that make you feel feminine too, from a man.
And again, I
And they
think there's,
want to do that. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
well, I think there's pieces of ourselves that we might need healing. And so to me, healing brings us back to wholeness. And when we're whole, we feel safe being vulnerable. And even if they show up in their trauma or whatever, things don't work out, it doesn't matter. We are integrous within how we want to show up. And it really doesn't matter, but it's that authenticity of ourselves. The other theme I wanted to really fluff out here is that the masculine is a lot of that doing energy. And I think we've really become a culture that is we find our worth by how much we achieve and how much we do. And this is one that I know I've been trying to unravel for the last couple of years. I'd be curious, ladies, if you got tips on, how people can start to unravel that for themselves, because truly, if we come into that feminine side, there's a receptivity. And to me, I think receptivity as that divine guidance that's going to come, those ideas, the creativity, the inspirations that come that allow us to receive, abundance, receiving your riches, whatever that is. But there's a different way, I believe, of achieving without all that chronic, hustle culture.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've been working on is what I call surrendering to the process. And it is not necessarily easy.
I love you.
I can't say that it is, because I come from getting up every day, going to work. Like when you're in an employee mindset and you do something every day to earn income, it's difficult to sit back and not do, or to sit back. And the thing is that you're not really not doing. The doing that you're doing is the thinking, the visualizing, the lining up to what you really want to see and where you really want to go and who you really want to be and the impact that you really want to make. It's lining up with that and being able to just sit and visualize that, or sit and meditate on that and sit. And I'm like, this is a lot of sitting. When do I do? So the not doing is and surrendering to the process. It's a surrendering is what it is for me right now. Is like even now I'm telling you guys that I'm working on my foundation and building the website, and it's like, but you should be doing, you should be seeing clients, you should be doing, and every day is a conversation with myself saying, you need to do this part first, surrender to this part, and then you'll be doing. So I think that masculine energy of doing, you actually have to tame it and talk to it and tell yourself, but you also have to know what you are surrendering to. So you don't just sit back and do, I'm surrendering to a process for a greater version of myself, and knowing that version and aligning with that. So first, knowing what you're surrendering to is huge as well, not just sitting back and just saying, I'm not doing anything. That's the fine line between not doing or surrendering. But it's a process. I think that's and I try
It's going to be a lifelong journey for me.
But I think about a mother that's carrying a child. Like they tell you to go on bed rest or sit down, you shouldn't do so much. So when you're nurturing something and bringing something to life, it's a time to just sit down and surrender to that process and allow it to birth out.
And you mentioned something magical, because Kathy asked, well, do we have any tips or any ideas of how to do that, right? And it's that observation, it's that intuition, it's that meditation. Those are the feminine aspects that allow us to stop the doing a little bit. And I agree with Kathy. I mean, I feel that it used to be that I used to have a weekend. Now I'm working sometimes 7 days a week and just constantly doing. And if I'm not doing, I feel guilty somehow that I'm not bringing my business forward somehow with all the things that it could do. And it reminds me of years ago when I went to Sedona for the first time with an ex-boyfriend's family, and it was such a beautiful experience. His mom turned around and said to me, stop doing and start being. And I'm like, oh, what does that mean? Right? It's like, sit and listen and watch nature around you, watch the flower bloom. And so every day I would go out and sit down and watch the flower bloom. And it took a very long time for me to actually get it. But it was such a beautiful process. That plant's not doing, it is allowing.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
that's just it. I think we've distanced ourselves so much from nature that we're not in our natural cycles like that. We feel so uncomfortable when we're not doing. And it's like, we have to create that space to allow the beingness so that we get that intuitive hit, so that we know when we're in alignment. The most efficient way that we can be is giving 100% in towards a direction that's in alignment with what our soul is here to express. And I think so often you can spend a whole freaking lifetime being busy, achieving in ways that we think society or other people need us to be, that we've completely missed our mark. Like, at the end of your day, did you get to do and live life on your terms? It's like, no, what's your unique gift here to give? And if you've missed that, I think you've missed the mark.
So it's interesting for me. Sorry, I just want to bring this out. I'd love to hear, Carol, your perspective, please, because it's so powerful always. But there's a combination somewhere between the doing and the checking in and receiving and asking source and asking yourself and asking spirit, what is the next best step? So that way the doing and the being can coexist also in a sort of dance, in a flow. And I just had that little aha moment, so I wanted to share that. Sorry, Carol, please tell us.
No problem. We think that we live in a culture where doing is all about the physical nature of doing, but there's a lot of doing in just being. It's not unimportant. I mean, it's not I did a double negative there.
It's really, really important.
It is, because the contemplation is that creative process, and there is a lot of doing in that, and it's meaningful and it's necessary. But so when we don't give ourselves that quiet time to dream and to contemplate and allow those creative juices to come forth, we're doing ourselves a disservice. And there is a great deal of doing in that. It's just not physical doing. And we don't, in our society, we don't allow for that enough. People think that I can't be still. Well, still is very active. Just because of the word still, it doesn't mean that it's not active, So I think that's really something for people out there to recognize, that when you can
It's okay to be still.
Right. When you can cultivate, when you can cultivate that stillness, that's still doing, and it's important. So that's a tip.
They tell that Albert Einstein used to take naps all the time, to allow that break time so that his brain could refresh and be creative again.
Yeah,
so that he could do. So that he could physically do.
I'd love to ask you, ladies, how do you embrace your divine feminine?
I don't
would say-
think about it a whole lot.
Okay. Just are.
Yeah, right. You know, whenever I need to call up my the masculine side, it appears, and I become the protector. I become the doer. And when I am in that, you know, need for feminine, you know, the feminine to pop up, I'm in that nurturing mode. I'm in that soft mode, if you will. The softness comes out, the compassion, the receiving comes out. And I don't see them as one or the other anymore. They coexist. And so there's no longer conflict within. It's when we're bouncing back between one or the other, and like a seesaw, that we tend to be in fight or flight mode. And through my own journey, I've just learned to allow whatever needs to show up in any given moment, and know that both sides still coexist. They coexist all the time. Like you were saying before, Claudia, they're just there.
Yeah.
My target right now is to live a spirit-led life. And so I cultivate practices like meditation and journaling and time in nature and those kinds of things to try to create that pause so that I can get the downloads from my guides. I call them Ralphie. So I want to talk with Ralphie more and more. That's how, but in that connection with something larger than myself, it gives me the courage to be okay when things are uncertain and to stay equanimous when things look rotten. You know, the world looks pretty rotten at times, like now. So those are the things I would say help me lean in towards the feminine. But again, like Joanna said, this is a work in progress.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same things. Just like I said before, finding that time to surrender to the process and mindfulness, visualization, those are huge for me. And the journaling, but more so about me, because that's helping me identify when I'm operating in which one, because I didn't realize that I operated in a masculine energy. Like I said, I didn't even know about that 10 years ago. So the more I get to know myself, and then I could say, okay, that's when it's a superpower to me to be able to kind of flip it, but knowing when it's necessary or when it's not. And that's the key for me.
Exactly.
Just, that moment when it's, oh, you need to now operate like this. Yeah, you need to, exactly. And because like Claudia said, I can help you move the luggage. I can get everything done and we can do it, but is it necessary? Like Carol said, they want to be able to do it and not allowing them to do it. So in that time of surrendering, I visualize myself being more in the feminine. That's something else I do, is being taken care of, because that's what it really ultimately is. Am I allowing someone to take care of me? And seeing a mother that didn't have to do that, I didn't know, I didn't allow that to happen. So the awareness of it, I think, is the all in all of it. So being able to shift that energy when necessary is huge.
I'd like to tell a quick story of being both at the same time. Years ago, a friend of mine, we were at a guru's talk, and we were just starting to get familiar with the group, and there was a woman there who took my friend's seat. His stuff was already in the seat. So and everybody was getting up to get coffee and tea and whatnot. And she decided she was going to sit there. And I said, that's his seat. I said very quietly. I didn't get up in her face, but I was protecting. There was a protection nature to me of him and where he put his stuff. And she said, oh, I didn't know. I said, his stuff was sitting right there. You did know. Quiet. Quiet. She got up and she left the room. But later on, she came back to me and she said, you're right. I did know. There wasn't any big fuss. There wasn't any big hoopla in the room about it. But I was being my feminine, but I was also being masculine all at the same time. So we can do both at the same time. They do coexist, and we don't have to go one way or another. We are it all the time. We are both all the time.
Do you have any role models or thought leaders that you think embody this well?
Are you asking me?
Everyone. Yeah, you start.
No.
It was a yes or no question.
Sorry.
Yes, no, for me. I think that, for example, Oprah is a woman whose work I really admire. And I think that she has a lot of the spiritual and a lot of the giving and a lot of the nurturing and a lot of the masculine make life work and make things happen. But such an integral kind of spirituality as well and intuition that she's developed. And I admire her tremendously. Somebody I'd love to work with at some point and get to know at some point.
Let's do
As
that.
I think many of us do, right? There are not that very many.
Yeah, isn't it? It's interesting. And one of the ones that popped to mind for me, I got to meet the president of Latvia, and it was a woman, and she was very feminine. I was really surprised. So I wonder if in Europe they've got a little bit more, I was going to say tolerance, acceptance, and embracing of that feminine side. But Meryl Streep is someone who comes to mind.
Someone that comes to mind for me is Michelle Obama. She's got tremendous grace, and she's strong. She's got a strong will.
Good one.
It's something that came up before, and we're kind of getting close to our end. So it's a tough subject to bring up this late in the game, but I think it's important because there's something, I think, unfortunately, that culturally we believe there's an aspect of the feminine that is dangerous, that is manipulative, that is coercive, that can be, the female wiles, right? And on the opposite side of that coin is the vulnerability of the being female, the being taken over, the being seen as a sexual object. Do you ladies want to speak into that at all and talk about how you have dealt with it or would empower another woman through it?
I think when we are on a journey of discovering who we really are, I think one of the key things is about understanding our own role in how our lives have been manifesting and all the manipulations that we have felt that we've needed to do in order to get what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can really honor that and take responsibility for it, that's when we come truly into our feminine power.
Mm-hmm.
When we acknowledge the taboos and all the, there's the question of what I've done to another and what another has done to me. And when we look at those two sides of the coin and take responsibility for it all, That's where the power comes to the fore. That's when we can really embrace our true anima animus
Mhm.
and hold it simultaneously together.
Nice
So-
drop.
Do you
Well,
want us
we've
thinking?
got 1 minute left.
That's what I was looking at. What's the time? That was such a great topic to bring up, but we only have like 2 minutes.
We might have to take that one.
We might have to come back to that
Another
one.
conversation, because that really is juicy, but talking about almost the archetypes or old historical things, it's like if we could put that to bed and just invite everyone to step into their queen. It was when I first heard the word, I was like, no, that's not me. But honestly, I think it's time. It's time for us to step into that queen. And what would that be for you?
So one quick thing, Peg Duchesne is with us, and she said Angela Merkel was somebody that came to mind
Ah,
for her as a powerful woman.
Nice.
Thanks, Peg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah.
wow, juicy conversation, just as I suspected.
Sorry.
Yes,
All right, so what are we talking about in the next couple of weeks, Claudia?
So yes, next time, please join us. If somebody supports me with the date, because I don't have the date.
It's the 21st.
Thank you so much, Carol. So May the 21st, please come back and join us. We will be talking about heart-centered meditation as the path to healing and the path to the oneness. And it's one of those amazing tools that we can use to allow all sides to reside in grace. And it brings a lot of the different subjects that we've spoken about in the last few weeks. How do we do that? How do we have the male and the female coexist in us and live them both in integrity, right? How do we have the different sides of the coin, duality, and coexist in us in integrity? So this is one of those amazing tools that will allow us to find that oneness and our connection to all that is. So I hope to see you there.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
So that's May 21st. Please join us.
Yes. Light and love, everyone.